Children of the Longhouse, Chapter 3. Again, but hopefully it works this time, Blair. Chapter 3, A Man's Cup. When O'Quarry came that evening to sit by the central hearth in the Turtle Clan section of the big longhouse, his uncle suspected that his nephew had something important to ask. So Big Tree continued to work in silence, giving his nephew plenty of time to collect his thoughts. It was fully dark outside now, and Grandmother Moon was looking down through the smoke hole overhead. Big Tree picked up a burning coal from the fire with his fingers, lifted it unhurriedly, and dropped it into the wooden cup that he was making from a piece of hard maple. He had been working on that cup for 2 moons, and it was almost finished. O'Quarry watched carefully. He remembered 2 winters ago when he tried to pick up a coal as his uncle did, but only succeeded in blistering his fingertips. Big Tree's fingers were tougher than O'Quarry's, and the calluses on them were so thick that the glowing coal did not burn them. It will be many seasons, O'Quarry thought, before I can do the things that my uncle can do. Big Tree placed the glowing coal into the bowl of the cup and nodded to his nephew. O'Quarry leaned forward. This job was one that he could do now. He could help his uncle finish hollowing the bowl by blowing the coal through the thin hollow branch of sumac. Sumac? That's a type of tree, I think. O'Quarry blew, and the coal burned with a sound of a tiny storm wind, reddening the blackened wood, burning the hollow deeper. He moved the branch as he blew steadily, puffing his cheeks in and out as he blew, making sure that the coal moved around the bowl evenly to make the inner shape of the cup just right. His uncle raised a hand, and O'Quarry stopped blowing. The coal, which had been the size of the end of his thumb, was now a tiny spark. Big Tree took out his sharp-edged scraping stone and used it to clean out the bowl. "This is good," his uncle said. "Now I only have to smooth the inside, and this cup will be ready to use." He held it up, and both he and O'Quarry admired it. The finely detailed handle was the long head of a bear. Big Tree had used his sharp flint knife to finish off the details of the bear's head at the front of the cup, even making markings that looked like the fur of the bear. Then he had blackened it in the fire to harden and darken it and make it look even more like a bear. "Who will be the owner of this cup, my uncle?" O'Quarry asked. "A man who needs it," his uncle replied with a smile. O'Quarry nodded. Every man owned a cup such as that, usually with some design on it which indicated his clan. Your cup, which would be hung from your belt, could be used for dipping up drinking water when you were in the forest. Dipping water with a cup was a wise idea, for you could remain watchful and alert while doing this. If you had to lean down and drink with your mouth from the spring or the stream, an enemy or a dangerous animal could creep up unseen. You could also thrust the cup deeper under the surface where the water was cleaner and colder. Then, when you were back in the longhouse, you could use your cup to dip soup from the pot when the food was ready and your hunger told you to eat. O'Quarry already had a cup of his own, a small one made of soft basswood that hung on his belt. But that cup was plain and chipped, and it was not well carved. It was a boy's cup. It was useful, but it was better to have something that was useful and beautiful. O'Quarry put the blowpipe back on the shelf above his uncle's bed. Like all things that would be useful to more than one person, it was kept in plain sight. That way, if anyone in the village had need of it, they could simply take it and return it when they were done. Truly personal things, like O'Quarry's stone with its 2 beautiful crystals, were kept out of sight in the bark boxes under everyone's beds. No one would ever look under another person's bed. O'Quarry came and sat back down by his uncle, who continued to work on smoothing the inside of the cup. "Uncle," O'Quarry said, "I think it is time for me to build a lodge." Big Tree continued to work on the cup without saying anything in response. "I do not mean that I think it is time for me to move away from my mother's hearth," O'Quarry said. "I know that it is still 2 or 3 winters before it will be time for me to do that, to go and live on my own. But I think that it would be good for me to make a little lodge and sleep in it some nights. It would be a good way to learn, a good way to make myself tougher and stronger." O'Quarry's words were true. In another few winters, he would be expected to move out of the Longhouse to no longer live near his mother. Then he would need to know how to care for himself. Every boy came to this time in his life when he was expected to go through a whole year of the hard training needed to be accepted fully as a man. He would find a place outside the village and build his own lodge, sleeping there every night. Although he could still return to the big longhouse and make meals with his family, he would be truly responsible for himself. Okwari waited, and still his uncle said nothing. Then Okwari realized why his uncle was silent. Okwari had only been telling his uncle what he hoped to do. He had not yet asked a single question of his uncle or made it clear that he wanted his uncle's advice. "My uncle," Okwari said slowly, "would you tell me what you think of my idea?" Big Tree looked up from his work. There was a smile on his face, as if he were trying not to laugh. "My nephew," he said, "yesterday you spoke bravely in the council circle, but now you have made Grabber and his friends think you are their enemy. If you make a little lodge somewhere away from the village, they might find you there and attack you. Is this not true?" Okwari tried to think of the right words to say. Otsatsiya was always telling him that he spoke and acted too quickly. He took a deep breath. "My uncle," Okwari said, "that may be true, even though I am not their enemy. So I think it is even more important now for me to do things to become tougher and stronger. As far as Grabber and the others are concerned," Okwari paused, "I'm sorry if they hate me, but I will not run away from them. A bear doesn't run away like a rabbit. Is that not true?" Big Tree laughed. Okwari could tell that he was not laughing at him, for it was the sort of laugh he had heard from his uncle when Big Tree found his favorite food in the pot or when something good was said to him. Big Tree was surely thinking of how right the name Okwari, which meant bear, was for his nephew. "Okwari," Big Tree said, "it is true indeed. I agree that it is a good idea for you to build a small lodge." He leaned forward and placed the finished cup into Okwari's hands. "As I said, a man needs this cup. So, my nephew, this cup is yours." Okwari held up the cup with both hands. It was the most beautiful thing that he had ever been given. He did not know what to say. Big Tree turned his head and thrust out his lips toward the other end of the big longhouse. "Now go and get your twin sister. I have something I want to share with both of you." Otsatsiya looked up as her brother came running down the central corridor of the longhouse. He had looked troubled when he rose after eating and walked in the direction of the Turtle Clan section, where their uncle Big Tree lived with his wife's family. But the look on Okwari's face was very different now, excited and triumphant. "Look," he said, thrusting his hands out towards his sister so suddenly that he almost tripped and fell into the fire. Otsatsiya steadied him by grabbing his elbow. Then she saw what he held. "Ah," Otsatsiya breathed. The cup was so perfectly carved that she knew only Big Tree could have made it. Everyone in their village admired Big Tree's ability to carve things from wood. He was not only the maker of cups like this one. He was also the carver of the two man-high poles set up outside the east and west approaches to their village along the river. The river at the forks. Big Tree's clever hands carved the powerful wooden faces that spoke with the voices of the great beings during ceremonies. To have something made by Big Tree was to have something truly wonderful. "Our uncle gave this to me," Okwari said, speaking so fast that it all came out as one word. Okwari saw the look on his sister's face and took a deep breath before she could tell him to do so. "He wants us to come back to their hearth. He has something to share with us. Haneo, come on!" Otsatsiya stood up. She felt excited, but she was determined to set a good example for her headstrong brother. "That is good," she said. "Let us walk over to the hearth together." Big Tree was still sitting by the fire, waiting for them. They sat down next to him as he put another piece of the peeled elm log into the fire and then stirred the coals with a long stick. This is not the season to tell stories, Big Tree began. Otsutsiya had begun rebraiding her long hair as soon as she sat down. Those words of her uncle's started her so much that she yanked hard, undoing the braid. Had her uncle heard her thinking about the stories? She looked up and saw that his eyes were not on her, but on the fire. As you know, those ancient stories are only meant to be told when the days are short and the nights are long. The Ayakatinoyaks, that's a tricky word. The little stone-throwing people are the guardians of those stories. And if they hear them being told in the spring or summer, they may throw a rock or turn themselves into bees and come and sting the lips of the one who's telling that story. Said Okwari, voicing his agreement. Otsutsiya elbowed him in the ribs. There are other kinds of stories, though, Big Tree said. There are the stories of how our great league was founded, and the stories of how our people traveled far to come to this land. Such stories, such histories of our people can be told in any season. So I have chosen to tell you this one tonight. Said Okwari, leaning away from his sister as she said it so that he would not get elbowed again. But this time, to his surprise, Otsutsiya added a loud heh of her own. Long ago, Big Tree said, looking down at the Mother Earth as he spoke, as if to listen and confirm the truth of his words. Our people lived far to the west. There we were brothers with the wolf people, and we lived among the great mounds of earth by the river. The grass was tall there, and there were herds of buffalo. We were happy there with our brothers, but as things happen sometimes, there was a disagreement. In those days, we remembered the original instructions of our Creator. The instructions were simple in those days. All that we had to do was remember to be thankful. So every morning we would say the great prayer of thanksgiving, remembering to thank everyone around us. We thanked our mother, the earth. We thanked the plants and the animals. We thanked the thunder beings, the sun and moon and stars and the Creator. You know this thanksgiving, for we still speak that prayer. We were all... Sorry, guys. Okay. I had to check my phone because I got a message, and I never know if it's really important, if it's one of you, but it wasn't. So, okay.
We were all just...
That's where I was, Westy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people did not fight with each other back then. We were all of one family. So, because there was strong disagreement, the only thing we could do was to move away. It was decided then that we who disagreed would leave there and travel toward the sunrise. We traveled a long, long time. We came to the mountains, and there were two trails. One led southeast, and one led northeast. Again, there was a disagreement. Half of the people took the trail to the southeast. They live now far south of us. They are the Oyata Geronan people. Big Tree paused, and this time both Otsutsiya and Okwari spoke as one, the word that meant both yes and that they were listening. Hey. Big Tree continued his story. The journey was a long one, and sometimes it was hard along the way. They met the other nations of people. Most were friendly, but some were worried that our people would settle in their hunting grounds, and so they did not allow us to make camp for more than a few moons before they urged us to go further toward the sunrise. There were times when our people went hungry, and other times when the hunters had to protect them from big, dangerous animals that we had never seen when we lived on the plains near the great river. Now the forest grew thick, and the trees were bigger and taller than any trees we had ever seen before. We continued on throughout that great forest. Once again, Big Tree stopped. Heh, said Okwari and Otsutsiya. Big Tree nodded. As our people traveled, he said, still more bands decided to go in other directions. Those who went north beyond the big inland of the seas became the Huron. But we continued on along the shores of the lakes until we came to a river that flowed from below the big falls we called Nagaya. It flowed up toward the winter land and toward the sunrise. That river led into another lake, the one we call Scanodario, the beautiful lake. Again, we followed its shore until we came to a great river running swiftly. It was the Ganoaga Gahanda, the rapid river. And after we traveled its banks for the journey of a moon, we came to a fine place to live. We knew we had found our new home. Heh. Big Tree smiled and looked at Otsitsia. Her face was so very much like Okwari's. She was braiding her long hair absent-mindedly as she listened intently. It was only when our people had reached the place that would be our home that the real trouble began. There were people already living there. Those people spoke a different language, and they did not look like us. There were far more of them than there were of our people. We saw how they used the bark of the trees to season their food, and because of this, we called them the porcupine people. Bark-eating people, Anantoks. Things did not go well between us. They tried to drive us out of their land, and we fought many battles with them until they defeated us. Then they forced us to pay tribute to them and act like their slaves. Our people could not stand that. We wanted to be free, so we made canoes out of elm bark, and one night we tried to escape by going up the river. The Anantoks soon found that we were gone, and they followed us. Their birch bark canoes were much faster, and they caught up to us late the next day. It seemed as if we would be taken back as slaves. But that was when the thunder beings, the ones we always remember to thank for bringing us the rain to make our crops grow, took pity on us. The thunder beings sent a great wind and a great storm. The canoes of the Anantok people were overturned by the wind and the storm, and many of them drowned. Those Anantoks who survived returned to their villages and never tried again to make slaves of our people. Big Tree leaned back from the fire and looked at Otsitsia and Okwari. That, he said, is usually as far as we tell this story, but there is more. Otsitsia, tell me, what do you think happened next? Otsitsia stopped braiding and rebraiding her hair. She cupped her hands together and held them up to her mouth, thinking hard. At last she nodded. Then we made peace with the Anantoks and began to trade with them. That is right, Big Tree said. His voice was very pleased. We did not try to make them our slaves, and we did not try to wipe them out. Although we have not always been their friends ever since that time long ago, we have tried to remain at peace with them. Big Tree reached out his long arms, placing one big hand on Otsitsia's shoulder and the other on Okwari's. That is what we do, Big Tree said. That is what we do, Big Tree said. That is the way of the people of the Longhouse. We fight when we need to fight, but we seek to be at peace with those who make themselves our enemies. Those same Anantok people are the ones that Grabber and his companions planned to raid. So it was a very good thing that what both of you did. That is why I have shared this story with you tonight. Naho, I have spoken.